guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today we have a very special guest who is going to be the star of this video. This is my cat Boba. He's definitely been in some vlogs and stuff, but I've never done a formal introduction. So he is going to be helping me pick out what I read for this video. Cats are definitely very independent. They're very different from dogs in that they're not really food motivated. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. I've seen a lot of people do this with their dogs, but again, dogs are very food motivated, so it'll be interesting to see how this works out. But I do feel like they have really great intuition, so I think Boba is going to be very helpful in picking out my reads. If you watch my April TBR video, I picked out 6 books because the way I want to set up this video is by having Boba pick from 3 different pairs. So I've kind of matched these books up based on things that I think are similar about them, and I'm going to put a TREAT on top of each one, and we'll see whichever one he goes to first. And that's how my reads are going to be picked for this video. And then of course I'm going to vlog reading these books and give you guys all my spoiler-free thoughts along the way. But first I'll show you guys all the books that Boba is going to be choosing from that are on my April TBR. Whenever I watch videos of people doing this with their dog is like sitting so nicely and still beside them the whole time. No, not Boba. Not Boba, but that's okay. We love him for the way he is. The first book on my April TBR is Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. I know this one is about this woman who is an author, and I think her book gets adapted into a movie, and she has a romance with one of the actors playing the love interest in the movie. This book just kind of gives me spring vibes. It's also very short, and I am in a bit of a reading slump right now, so a short book, a quick and easy read is definitely what I'm wanting right now. In a similar vein, I'm going to be matching that book up with Yerba Buena by Nina LaCour. This one also just gives me spring vibes. I know this one is a sapphic romance. I think they meet at a bar, but one of them works in the floral industry. They're either a florist or just do like flower arrangements in a flower shop, which gives me, again, very spring vibes. And this book is under 300 pages, so definitely what I'm wanting while I'm in a bit of a reading slump. The next book on my TBR is In the Weeds by B.K. Borison. This is the second book in the Love Light Farm series, and this series is so seasonal reader coded, which I love as a seasonal reader myself. The first book was the Christmassy winter book, and this one takes place in the spring. We're following the romance with one of the guys who works on the Christmas tree farm and this girl that he had a one-night stand with, and they are reconnecting, coming back into contact with one another. I loved the first book, so I'm really wanting to read this book in the spring. If Boba doesn't pick it for me today, I'm still going to try to get to it later this month or next month. And then I'm going to be matching that book up with Finale by Stephanie Garber. This is the 3rd book in the Caraval trilogy, and this trilogy has just been on my TBR for so long. I really need to know how it's going to end, and I really want to finish it out so that I can get to the spin-off trilogy, which is the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. That trilogy just gives me spring vibes, so I'm really wanting to read it while it is still spring. So this is one of our options for today as well. Then we have Daisy Hates the Great Undoing by Jessa Hastings. This is the 4th book in the Magnolia Park series, but it's Daisy Hates' 2nd book. And from reading this series, I have realized that I much prefer Daisy's books to Magnolia's. I just love her character so much, and I think this book is definitely one of the fan favorites of the series. So I'm really excited to see where Daisy's story goes. I think this is also the book where people fall in love with Julian Hayes' character, so very excited to get more from his perspective as well. And then the final book on my TBR is Redeeming Six by Chloe Walsh. So many series on my TBR for the month, but this is book 4 in the Boys of Tommen series, and it is the 2nd book following Joey and Eva, and I'm really hoping that this book just has the happiest of endings for these 2 characters, because book 3 was filled with so much pain. So I really do want to get to this one and prioritize it. I'm hoping Boba picks it today, because book 5 in this series actually comes out this week that I'm filming this, so definitely want to get to this one very soon. So those are all the books on my TBR that Boba is going to be deciding between. I'm going to go ahead and pair all the books up and then have him choose what we're going to be reading. Hi guys, I started the first book that you saw my cat pick out for me, which is Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. This book is super short. I feel like I'm going to binge it. I don't know how many updates I'm going to give before I get to the end, but I've made a bit of a dent in it, so I wanted to give you guys my first thoughts and impressions because I already have some pretty strong opinions on the book. So I was a little bit incorrect on what this book is about. I thought Nora was an author who wrote books, but she's actually a screenwriter. She usually writes very romancy type of scripts for the equivalent of like the Hallmark Channel in this book, and it's reminding me a lot of Book Lovers, kind of how Book Lovers poked fun at the whole traditional Hallmark movie where we have someone from the city move to the country and abandon their city life for this person they fall in love with in the country. Those are the kind of scripts that Nora writes, but she switched it up a little bit, and her latest script that she wrote is based off her real life. Her husband Ben left her and her family, and so she wrote a script about that. It does not have a happy ending, but it gets picked up by Hollywood and is being made into a movie, and they're filming some of the movie at her actual house. So there's all these big actors there in her backyard filming, and once they wrap up after a few days, the lead actor who's playing her husband in the movie asks to like crash there for a little bit, and Nora's like, sure, fine. And I'm having so much trouble suspending my disbelief because I'm like, okay, first of all, forget the fact that he's this big famous Hollywood actor. Why would he want to stay at her place? Why is she not asking more questions? Like, she's just so unfazed by it. She doesn't really care. She's like, sure, you can stay here. I feel like she's not acting how a normal person would. She's just so unbothered, so nonchalant about the whole thing, so unfazed. There's a little bit of like, oh gosh, I should like change the towels because he's a big Hollywood actor, but other than that, she's like, I don't know, very unbothered. And it has me so unable to suspend my disbelief. I feel like I've only seen 4 and 5 star reviews of this book. Right now, I cannot see myself rating this book any higher than 3 stars because I don't think I can get behind their romance because I can't wrap my mind around why he's there and why Nora's not asking more questions and why she's not the least bit fazed or starstruck by his presence. And they'll go out in public and like all these people are flocking to them, but maybe the more I read, I'll get answers to some of that and some stuff will be explained. But right now I'm just like, I can't see myself getting that invested in the characters. I don't really care enough, and I can't suspend my disbelief at the situation and how it came about. I'm just kind of baffled by the whole thing because it's not how I feel like a normal person would be acting in this situation. I know it's a book, but still, I feel like there needs to be a few more questions asked. That's how I'm feeling right now. I don't dislike it by any means, but it's more so I'm just kind of like flabbergasted at the situation. But I'm gonna continue reading. I might update you guys when I finish the book. Maybe if my thoughts change, I'll talk to you before then, but I will let you guys know how it ends up going. Hi guys, coming at you with wet hair, literally in my pajamas, but I finished Nora Goes Off Script and I wanted to share my final thoughts. I'm so happy to report that this book got a lot better for me since my last update. I still am not over the beginning where Nora was not as starstruck as I feel like she should have been and not asking as many questions as I feel like I would have if I was in that situation. So it was a little bit hard to suspend my disbelief, and I didn't think I was going to be able to get over that because I wasn't super invested in the characters otherwise. But a situation ended up happening that added a whole lot of suspense, and it was something that I thought was going to be resolved super quickly. I thought it would be like a week and then it would be resolved and this little issue would be just like a blip in the story. But then it so happened that like a few weeks passed and then a couple months, and I was like, oh my gosh, what could be going on here? And I was flipping the pages. I needed to know what was going to happen. I was just filled with like so much anticipation. The way the suspense was building up, I was so anxious to see what was going to be revealed, and I loved how the ending was done. I thought it was so good, and the more we got to the end, the more I was like, okay, I actually really care about these characters and want them to be together. So I ended up really enjoying it. I really liked how the ending was done. Still a little frustrated with the beginning part, but overall I ended up liking it the more I read, which is always fun. I love when a book just gets better and better with every chapter, with every page. So I had a fun time with this one. Overall, it reminded me a lot of Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman. I feel like if you liked that book, or at least like the concept, I really liked the execution of this one maybe a little better. So I really would recommend this one. I think I'm gonna give it 4 stars, which I could not have seen myself giving in the beginning of the book in my first update. So very pleasantly surprised and happy with how this one ended up turning out, and I really enjoyed it. Hi guys, I am a good ways into this second book that Boba picked out for me, and I can see why he picked this book because our mailman character, Beckett, is a cat dad. I had forgotten in Love Light Farms that he came into this situation where now he has a bunch of kittens and it is super cute. There's also a little duck that came into the picture, which my cat's favorite toy that he plays with is his duck that he got for Easter. So it's all very fitting, it's all super cute. I can see why he picked this book, but this is the second book in the Love Light Farms series. We're following Beckett and Evie. Evie is a social media influencer, and then Beckett works on the Christmas tree farm, and they had this one night stand previously, and now they are both coming back together. But I was trying to give this book more of a chance because it took me a while to get into Love Light Farms. I remember I didn't start really liking that book until like the 150 page mark, so it took a while for that book to get going for me. So I was trying to give this book the same chance because I wasn't pulled into it right off the bat, so I was trying to wait till the 150 page mark at least before giving you guys some updates. But I'm now well past that. I am on page like 253, and I don't really have strong opinions one way or the other because for the most part I feel like I'm just kind of bored of this book. Nothing is really happening plot wise, and I also feel like as far as like the personal development and like the things the characters are going through individually, not a whole lot is happening either. And I don't know, their dynamic is so interesting to me because I thought that there would be so much tension in this book because they have this one night stand and now like they're back together, forced proximity situation. I feel like when we're in the characters' heads, they're not really thinking like, oh, I want to be with this person again, I want to recreate that night, I want something. We just don't really know how they feel about the other person even when we're inside their own heads and getting their internal thoughts, and they're not really telling the other person one way or the other whether they want to be with one another or not. So to me it's coming off as like they don't actually like each other and they don't really have a connection. I'm kind of bored. I'm not getting much out of the characters or the relationship, and I was so excited for these characters and their story. Like Beckett's character, what we saw of him in Love Light Farms, I could not wait to get his point of view. I was so ready for his romance. And then Evie, I felt like she was going to be a character that I could really relate to because she does YouTube. They're just not really giving me anything, and I feel like even if they aren't speaking to one another in real life when they're in the present, when I'm in the characters' heads I need to get a little more than I am. We'll see. Hopefully it gets better from here to the end. I feel like I won't have any more thoughts before I finish the book because I don't know, right now I just feel not super strongly one way or the other, which sometimes is almost worse than disliking a book really strongly because I just don't have a lot to say. The book is kind of not giving me much. So right now it's just kind of feeling like a very neutral 3 stars. There's nothing like specifically bad about it, but I'm not really enjoying my time. So I'm hoping that changes from here to the end. I will let you guys know how it goes. I've now finished In the Weeds, and unfortunately I kind of wish I didn't finish it because this book was just not an enjoyable time from my last update until the end. I just got more and more bored and I felt like the book just really started to drag, and this book was almost just too descriptive for me. It was so overly detailed that it just made the book drag on for what felt like forever, and that is never a complaint I would have about a book because I prefer things to be almost more descriptive and more detailed because I'm such a visual person that I like to be able to see everything playing out while I'm reading like a movie. But this one just had way too many details that it almost started to bog the story down, and it was like for every 10 pages there would maybe be 1 to 2 sentences of relevant information like meat of the story, and the rest would just be descriptions of things around them, the way people looked, just so many details, and it just made me so bored. I was like skimming over the details by the last 50 pages. I was so over it. I was honestly hating the book a little bit and ready for it to be over. And aside from that, I feel like I maybe could have overlooked that aspect of the book if I liked the characters and I was rooting for them, but I just was not at all. I really didn't care about either of them. I felt like for their situation. Like I said, they had this one night stand and now there's this forced proximity situation that they're in. There was no tension, where I felt like that kind of situation normally in a romance book would make for so much tension. I also felt like there was just this lack of mutual pining, like when we were in each of the characters' heads. I had no idea what they wanted to do. I didn't feel like they cared one way or the other if they ended up with the other person. Maybe a little more on Beckett's side. I did feel like he had feelings for Evie, but he just had trouble communicating that. Evie, I couldn't get a read on her. I didn't know how she really felt. At the end of the day, I felt like maybe they shouldn't have been together at all. I just wasn't rooting for them, didn't feel the connection, didn't care, was so bored with the story, which is super, super sad with how much I loved the first book in this series and how much I loved these characters in the first book. I feel like this was just a case of them working better for me as side characters than as main characters, which also makes me very, very hesitant to jump into any more books in this series. I know book 3 is already out and book 4 comes out later this year, and I love the characters that those books are about based on what we see of them as side characters in the first couple books, but now I'm like, maybe I won't enjoy them as main characters. So we'll just have to see. This one just did not work for me, unfortunately, and it's also super sad because one reading goal I set for myself this year was to not rate any books below 3 stars, and this one is going to be a 2-star for me. So this is my first book of the year that I rated below 3 stars, which is very sad and also surprising. I did not anticipate this book being any lower than maybe like 4 stars, possibly 3.5, but unfortunately just was not the case. I'm sad about it, I'm bummed out, but it just didn't work for me. I was just overall bored. So I'm gonna jump into the third book of the video and hopefully better things are to come. Yesterday I started book 3 of the video, Daisy Hates The Great Undoing by Jessa Hastings. This is book 4 in the Magnolia Parks universe, but it's the second book following Daisy and her brother Julian and her love interest Christian Hims. This book is also told from the same timeline of events as book 3, just from these characters' perspectives. Yesterday I made it to page 71. I'm using my Mona Lisa bookmark that I got from the Louvre. Feels super, super fitting, very Daisy and Julian coded. If you know, you know. But already 70 pages in, I've cried twice at this book. I think by page 30, I was like, yeah, I already know this is gonna be another 5-star for me from this series. It just feels so refreshing to be back in this world with these characters. I think I've mentioned before that I kind of prefer Daisy's books to Magnolia's. I loved book 3, the second Magnolia book. I gave that one 5 stars, but something about Daisy's character, I love her. I feel like this is gonna be my favorite book of the series so far. I feel like it's kind of the fan favorite of the series, and I feel like we're also gonna learn so much about Julian in this book. I know people fall in love with him in this one. I'm excited to see why, because right now he's not really my favorite. I'm kind of having trouble seeing why he gets so much hype, but I feel like a lot's gonna be revealed in this book. There's so many things that I'm anticipating happening that happened in book 3 that I cannot wait to see go down from these characters' perspectives. Also things kind of happening behind the scenes that I'm just ready to get all the information on while reading this book. I'm just so excited to be back in this world. It's just the most refreshing feeling to consume Jessa's writing. It's just so unique and so beautiful, and I love it, and these characters are just so comforting to me. Literally my only plans for today really are to read this book. That's going to be my main priority. So I will definitely update you guys as I have thoughts. I'm over halfway through Daisy Hates now, and I might have spoken a little bit too soon when I said this was feeling like a 5-star off the bat. These books aren't plot heavy anyway, but I feel like it's almost just getting a little bit too repetitive, where I need the story to pick up the pace a little more. I need a little bit more to happen because not a whole lot is going on. And the thing with these books that really impressed me with book 2 especially, book 2 takes place at the same timeline of events as book 1, but it did not at all feel like repetition or the same story in a different character's point of view. It felt like its own story, and the things that were repeated and there was overlap, I was very interested to see from different characters' perspectives. Whereas this book, I feel like we're not really getting that much that's new. I feel like the scenes I was really excited to see from like Julian's perspective and see the behind the scenes. I don't know, I feel like the things that were being told are kind of like obvious, and I kind of already knew and could have guessed is what these characters were thinking in book 3. I was just kind of hoping for brand new information, which I know based on what's to come that we're gonna learn new things that are gonna be pretty pivotal, but I don't know. I'm just hoping for more with the plot. I feel like so far maybe there's been like 2 chapters where I didn't feel like it was super repetitive. But I am reading this one very quickly. I feel like it's not as heavy as the other books, so I'm able to binge it a little bit more. But it's not completely feeling like the 5-star it did at the beginning. Right now it's like 4.75, depending on how the last scenes in the book play out. I feel like are gonna be make or break on how I feel about this book. But right now I'm not loving it the way I was. I'm still really liking it, but I feel like I need more from some of these characters and a little more from the plot. I finished Daisy Hates yesterday, and right after I finished, I really needed to sit with my thoughts because I was going back and forth on a rating. I was very much between 4.75 and 5 stars. I just couldn't decide, so I really wanted to sleep on it. And I feel like this book was a little bit underwhelming for me. I was going into it expecting it to be my favorite book of the series, and I kind of think it's my least favorite book of the series so far, which is a bit disappointing, especially with how much I loved Daisy's first book. I was so impressed with how it took place at the same time as Magnolia's book, but it did not feel repetitive at all. It felt very much like its own story, and then when there was overlap, it was so interesting to see the other side to things. Whereas this book, I feel like we didn't get that much new information. I feel like the background info we did get was kind of obvious from what we saw in book 3. There were a few tidbits here and there that we got that was new that I did enjoy. I did like seeing Julian's opinion on certain things. I liked seeing how things between Daisy and Christian played out. But for me, I was most disappointed because the big thing that I wanted to see happen in here that happened in Magnolia's book, the book kind of cut off right before then. So it left me hanging a little bit. It had me feeling a little bit disappointed, and I do think this is probably my least favorite book of the series. Just not a whole lot happened in it, but at the same time, I still love the series so much. I love these characters so much. So that's what had me kind of going back and forth, but I do think I'm gonna give this one 4.75 stars just because it is my least favorite so far. But this series in general still is a 5-star series for me, and this still was a great book. I don't want the fact that I'm coming off as a little bit negative and critiquing it to take away from that, because this was incredible. So I did want to wrap up the video. The first book Boba picked for me was Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. This one at the start had me a little bit unable to suspend my disbelief. I kind of wish Nora would have asked a few more questions, or at least acted a little bit more starstruck than she did. And I kind of feel like there could have been more explanation as to why this actor wanted to stay at her house. So the premise and the setup was a little bit iffy for me, but once we got to this element of the story that was a little bit suspenseful, it was so unexpected for me that it hooked me in, and I could not put the book down from that point on. I thought the ending was done so well, and I ended up really loving it. I do think the ending turned things around for me in the best way, and it did make me realize that I cared about the characters and was rooting for them to be together, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. In the Weeds by B.K. Borison was a bit of a disappointment. It's the book that follows Love Light Farms, and I loved Love Light Farms so much. I loved the characters that this book follows in that book, but I did not love them as much as main characters. I didn't feel like there was that much of a connection between them. I feel like this book really lacked the mutual pining that should have been there based on their dynamic. I feel like there were so many details that just really made the story drag out. So unfortunately, this one was a 2-star for me and a bit of a disappointment. My first book that I rated below 3 stars this year. But then we jump back into one of my favorite worlds, one of my favorite series, Daisy Hates: The Great Undoing. You just heard my thoughts. It was my least favorite of the series, but that being said, it's still one of my favorite series. So being the least favorite of one of my favorite things is still amazing, and this book was 4.75 stars. So I do want to thank my sweet cat Boba for helping me pick out my reads today. He did such a great job, so he is getting a treat. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Let me know if you want to see more videos with Boba featured. I would love to do them and include him a little bit more on my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you so soon in my next video. Bye guys. Boba, say bye.